What is an Axiom II rotation?
So Axiom
What?
2 rotation is another concept in addition to Axiom 2. So one thing I should clarify is that talking about Axiom 2 is to talk about the axiom, and it essentially is the flow of the modalities within a domain.
Right.
We're talking about rotation. We're usually talking about a pattern of phase shift in the modal correspondences from one domain to a successor domain. And that's a
Yes.
trickier thing. That's like a meta concept, or it's a meta expression of Axiom 2, but it's not itself just Axiom 2. It would really be helpful if I had come up with a better nomenclature for this to talk about an Axiom 2 rotation as distinct from Axiom 2. But, unfortunately, sometimes things just fall out the way they do. And when things are happening across years, you occasionally end up with terminology inconsistencies like this. So my apologies for that. Yeah, so usually you'll see an Axiom 2 rotation when there's a handful of conditions applied. So, for example, it doesn't make any sense to talk about a rotation in the modal correspondences if I don't have more than one set of modal correspondences. Right? I have to have the modality correspondences before and the modality correspondences after. And so I have to have some sense of what I mean by before and after. Well, the state before and the state after, or the domain before and the domain after, it usually shows up when we're going across domain lines. Because if it was within the same domain, I would just be looking at the process within the domain. Whereas what I'm really talking about is I have a process in one manifestation or in one domain, and a corresponding process in another manifestation or another domain. And when I look at the correspondences in terms of the modalities in each of the domains, I notice that they're shifted with respect to one another. And we basically say, well, why the heck is that happening? Well, it's partly because those two domains themselves are wrapped in some sort of larger process that at least from a subjective point of view, has it seemed that the properties of the prior domain and the properties of the successor domain are sequenced in a certain way. And there are various examples of this, but at the moment, I don't want to go down into all that unless there's a real just like completion of the sort of core metaphysics. But it is something we see quite a bit. We notice this a bunch. When we start working out correspondences, we'll find uh, a preponderance of these sorts of things happening, particularly when we're starting to really take into account an orientation from an immanent point of view. Two domains are related in an Axiom 2 way, right? Because they're related by process. And that the net effect of that is that by looking at things that are characterized in the omniscient in one sense, I'll end up with things characterized in the transcendent in the next, or from the transcendent to the immanent. So in a sense, it's a bit like by working in the transcendent in the prior domain, I can essentially manifest something within the immanent of the successor domain. And this turns out to be very relevant for category 3 things.